All right, we're at Baltimore Comic Con with AC Medina, who is the writer for Elasticator from Scout Comics. The issue 5 is just out. So, first question is always the simplest of where the actual concept of Elasticator came from.
Well, Elasticator started, I mean, you know, when we're all young and kids, we all have our dream superheroes that we would draw like horribly, but we wanted to make them. And at around like age 16, I finally started doing like short little, you know, just word documents, just short stories about them. And flash forward a couple years later, when I'm taking my writing a lot more serious, I decided, I need to make my first project. And what would be the perfect first project? Well, the first thing I used to read as a kid as comics were superheroes, you know, like everyone. And so I decided I got to make my own superhero. I know, no one like making an indie superhero comic is shooting yourself in the foot, but I took the risk anyways, and I decided to make him. And originally, he was just your basic kid fantasy superhero, but with Elasticator, growing up, I've had some crazy times in my life, not just me, just anyone in my generation. And I wanted to make someone that reflected that in a more broken, less preachy way. And I created Elasticator. He represents everything I love and hate about my generation, and maybe even about myself. Who knows? But he came to be as kind of a boyhood dream in a way.
So it is one of the few, if not maybe the only.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Baltimore Comic Con.
We're going to talk through this and see if we can filter that out. All right, so it's one of the only comics that I can think of that actually discusses the the recession in 2000. How long have you been working on the series, and why did you kind of use that as part of the driver for the story?
Well, what I wanted to do is that's a topic that's very strong. I think every problem in our current day and age can be brought back to that. That was like the catalyst of whatever direction we're going in right now, So I wanted to figure out a way to do that by sneaking it in and through superhero action. See, a lot of our characters, especially Mikey and Luther, they represent for me different parts of the recession and gentrification embodied in two different guys. At the end of the day, they are very much similar, and with our ending, we really bring that home to you. We show that we wanted to show the recession, we wanted to show everything that's changed, everything that's good, and most of the bad through their actions. That's why Brooklyn is the third main character of our story. We do a lot of background storytelling in the sense that we want you to pay attention the whole time that Brooklyn really is in for something catastrophic at the end of the story. And we wanted to show that through our characters, through our world, and we want to let the readers figure it out. No one character in this story takes all the blame, but the silent victim in this story is Brooklyn, and for me, I think that was all of America in this time, and I wanted to focus in a city that was A, iconic, and B, is now even more iconic, but it has changed a lot. And I wanted to show why that change happened, and is that change any good? That's why we did what we did with the story.
So as you keep on bringing, you said Brooklyn is kind of one of the main characters of the series, like the area itself. What is it about New York City that kind of lends itself to superheroes? Because you think about it, like, Marvel's out of New York, DC was based in New York. Like New York, what is it about New York that lends itself to comics so well?
Well, I think it's the sense that everyone in New York, a lot of the people that live in New York aren't from New York originally, and I think that's why. I think people look at New York as a sort of escape from their mundane or anything. It's sort of a place that, if I'm here, I'm doing things right.
The city itself is a fantasy.
Yeah, the city is a fantasy. You meet people from all walks of life, and it's been like that for almost forever. Like even nowadays, it's very similar. Like you see a lot of people that live in the city now. They have the same dreams, same goals, aspirations as people who moved to the city in the 80s and the 60s. It's something about it that I guess just gives it like a fantasy sort of, everyone can be here. And with superheroes, it's so vast, so there's so many different ones that it's good to show them there. So I think that's why New York really attracts as a good location. I actually reason I chose Brooklyn was because I didn't want to do Manhattan, because it's, you know, it's what everyone kind of associates when you think of New York. And for me, Brooklyn in any other state, Brooklyn would be an iconic, huge city. I still think of it as an iconic city, and it is an iconic city, but it gets a little overshadowed by Manhattan. So we wanted to be the opposite of that. That's why, I mean, Manhattan never shows up. We don't have the giant skyscrapers. We don't have, you know, the guys in suits in the whole business sort of district. We have, you know, we show Brooklyn. We show, and this especially comes into play at the end of the series with the new upcoming issue 6. We really show how much Brooklyn was important, not to just to us, but to the story and to everything in general.
So I reread the comic last night, and it really stood out to me this time, and I think it seems more so when you read them all at once, that pretty much the only good folks in the comic are women. It's his mom, and it's the detective, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I grew up with a very powerful mom, and it's one of the things, like, I wanted to add that. I feel like the whole saying behind every great man is a great woman, I think that's kind of like, I think, you know, there's just great women in general. They don't need a man, you know. And the reason that show up, I almost feel like I did that subconsciously. Like, it wasn't a goal. Like, Amparo, I wanted to show her as my version of a Gordon. And, you know, we made her young. Like, she's kind of like, she's a different sort of police officer, yeah. You know, and I'm really proud of her. Milena as well is like, you know, it's a mom, you know. For me, there's no real stronger love or bond than a mom's love. A real, you know, a mom that's loving. Of course, there's been horrible mothers and all that, but I mean, it really was, it's just something that happened naturally, I guess. It's funny that you mentioned that, because now that I realize, I'm like, yeah.
Well, there's like this father's a piece of crap. The cops are all crooked. At least all the male cops are all crooked, except her partner, who didn't seem like he was, but he got. No spoiler.
He's the true hero of the story.
Yeah. And then you've got the crooked politician. You got Luther. All the drug dealers are guys. So yeah, like when I read through it, I'm like, holy crap! It really is just this. So the other because when I originally read it was digital. Mm-hmm. With the print's a little different in that you used the inside cover for page, which you never see that in comics. Yeah. You know, how did that actually come about? Usually that's either credits or just a straight up advertisement for something.
Well, I guess you know, there's two stories of it. When we originally, because this was me and Kevin's first time ever making a comic. Like, we didn't do web comics. We didn't do like short 5-page comics. We didn't do any of that. We just like got together and we're like, hey dude, you want to make a comic? And we did that, and one mistake that we did was we didn't account for a credits page for issue 1. And when it came time to print, our editorial director, Michael Sanchez, was like, hey, we got a problem. Your pages are kind of weird, and you have no place to put a credits page. And as you can see, the story is, it's each issue is 29 pages of story content. There's only one ad, and that's the last page. So what Michael suggested was, well, why don't you do like in the third page it works, you know? And then that came the idea of kind of like intro credits for television shows, you know?
That's the vibe I got from it too, yeah.
And that's what we want to do. That's why each credits page is like a splash. The issue 6 one is the coolest one yet. It's awesome, and it actually ended up adding a little bit of a flavor to it that we enjoyed. And I mean, that's how it came to be, through a lot of newbie mistakes.
Fair. Well, I didn't ask the question, and you said that it's your first comic. Why did you go about wanting to make a comic series, or instead of a web comic or digital comic, or, you know, just a stories or something like that? Like, what drew you to the comic medium?
I mean, it may sound cheesy, but the dream, you know.
It's not cheesy.
You know, when you think of comics, you think of like the team huddled all together, coming up with this idea. And we obviously, you know, our colorist lives in Scotland, our letterer is from Virginia, Kevin's in Chicago, and I'm in New York, so we couldn't be together, but we do a lot of Skype. Like, I think most of our collaboration comes through me and Kevin constantly being on Skype together and just talking about what we want to do with each issue. Now, that sense of old school, we kept it in that we didn't want to do the webcomic, because even though it's awesome to do a webcomic, and I mean, it would have probably helped us with a following beforehand, I wanted to do a comic in the traditional sense, you know. I wanted to do the whole hunting for a publisher, finding one, dealing with print issues, and I learned so much through doing that, which I think I wouldn't have learned if I did a digital or webcomic. I wouldn't have learned, dealing with a printing house or dealing with how your colors look when they're printed,
The credit thing in the first page you wouldn't have had to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't have had to deal with any of that. So I think we set it up to be as challenging as possible,
right.
And we'll see if it paid off.
How long did it actually take from concept to print of the first issue?
Well, so me and Kevin came up with starting working together. We started doing the project last summer around July. It was funny. I was actually going to Vegas for a buddy's birthday, and in Vegas, having a little fun, Kevin sends me the tryouts, the audition sort of things, because I was looking through a lot of different artists, and as soon as I saw it on my phone, I was like, all right, guys, I got to go back into my hotel room. I got to go make a comic. And that's what ended up happening. Then flash forward to October of that year, we're at New York Comic Con. I was able to have saved up enough to get a small booth, and it was just me, Kevin, my editor at the time, and a buddy of mine. And we had a 5-page preview, and we printed 50 of them. We ended up selling out by the beginning of Saturday, and by Sunday we met our publisher. And then the week after that we had a meeting with them. And with Scout, what was cool about Scout is that they have everything the big publishers have. They have Diamond, they have Comixology is coming now. And I was in, and I didn't want to submit an indie superhero book to the big guys, because I knew I was going to get shut down right away. No matter if it didn't matter if my writing was like Alan Moore and Kevin's art was like Jim Lee's, they weren't going to pick us up. We had no name. So I wanted to start with a publisher from the ground up, and that's what I did with Scout. And then March we came out with issue 1, which it was kind of scary because we didn't have any buffer months. So Kevin has done each issue the month prior for it releasing.
It's impressive. It's a good turnaround.
Which I think is crazy, and I guess it goes back to that old school feeling.
Yeah.
And again, we learned trial and error, and we learned.
So what's the biggest thing that you've learned?
Oh, definitely plan ahead. You need to, my new series that I'm working on, I'm planning on releasing them. The earliest is probably spring of next year, because you need to give it that time. There's so much that goes into this. Actually creating the content is the fun part, therefore the easy part. The hard part is promotion, getting retailers to want to buy your product, and that was what we learned the most, is how to promote, and again, plan ahead. Have a good seamless plan. And that's definitely what I recommend for anyone that's looking to get into this.
So we talked about it a little yesterday when I was hanging out at your booth with the action sequences, the actual fights. And it feels, again, reading it, we talked about reading it as a trade versus reading it as single issues. And reading them the 5 issues in a row, it becomes a bit more apparent to me, and I could kind of see what you're saying with the trade.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like a video game in the style, where you're kind of you're building through and getting to the level until you get to the boss battles at the end.
Yeah.
Was that slightly on purpose?
Yeah. Right now, me and my friends we're all trying to get into this, we use the expression, it's like a video game often, and I've been hearing that a lot more because this generation of creators, it's not a bad thing, yeah. This generation of creators grew up with video games being very common and very story-based, and we did want that because it kept it so each issue would be better than the last. We also, the fights, we wanted them to count. Our book you could call Elasticator a fight book. There's a lot of fights going on in it.
Issue is when it kind of kicks up.
Yeah, but and that's what we wanted to do exactly. We want, because if you recall during the beginning, issue 1 and 2 are very slow.
Yeah.
And it was all intentional.
That's going to be my next question about that, if you want to kind of keep on talking about. So the other thing I noticed was, the first 3 or 4 issues is an origin story, and then it's the 5th one is when it kind of really drops.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to do because I want this story, I believe a lot in character, and I wanted you to fall in love with Mikey despite him being horrible.
Yeah.
And for the most part I think people did, and when you finally see him around issue 5, you don't want bad things to happen to him, and that's when the horrible things actually start happening to him. My whole time in this story I said I've said from the beginning I wanted this to be a tragedy, and in order to do proper tragedy, you need to do origins properly, because you're not going to care about the character, and it's not going to be a tragedy. It's not going to feel tragic if you don't care about the character. So that's why we wanted to really take our time with it, and we also wanted to make that moment when you saw him as a hero with a power feel heroic, you know? And that's why issues 1, 2, and even 3, you know, he doesn't put on the suit till like issue 4. And even then, he hasn't had a fight in the suit yet, you know? And that's something we wanted to make up. Like, I would go as far as to say that issue 6 is the actual superhero story, you know? You have the big bad, the hero, they're gonna fight. They're gonna finally show it. And that's what we wanted to do, you know? We wanted to slow build it, so once it started exploding, you know, there's nothing you could do. There's nothing to contain it.
So issue 4 also kind of felt like a horror story a little bit. So when he gets, you know, his powers, I'm reading, I'm like, this is straight up horror. This is superhero. This is like a really interesting mix to it. Is that something that was on your mind or you did on purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to, like, it's one of those things that goes back to about doing your first book. I plan on dabbling, if all goes well, in every genre in my career. And I guess with Elasticator, it's a bit of a showcase of our skills. So like issue 4, you know, it was kind of a horror story, because you start off with the nightmare that we were really excited for, and people really reacted well to. And then it's the fact that, you know, if you wake up and your arm can turn into any shape, that's not something that you're just like, oh, this is cool, I'm gonna have fun like Spider-Man and swing around. You're gonna be like, what the hell's going on with me? Am I dying, you know? And like, for people that have read it, you know, Mikey has this little mode that he goes into. It happens in issue 3, happens again in issue 5. And that's very much intentional. It's very much about his powers. Yeah. And it's interesting that you said that the part about the horror, because like, I wasn't really intentional, but I guess it kind of just snuck out there.
Like when he gets drowned and gets his powers, I'm like, this is straight up horror. He just butchers everyone, and he wakes up afterwards, and he's like, what the hell is going on? This superhero horror, come on. So you talk about their next one. Can you give any hints as to what can we see next from you?
Well, like I said, taking your time is very important. So right now, everything's very much an early concept stage. But I mean, I'm really excited. I'm excited to not have to have fun in other genres. And again, genre bending. I mean, I can say I have something in works right now that if I give you a high concept, it's Mad Max meets Pulp Fiction. Okay. I mean, like when, you know, my brain, I guess, like I just mix and match stuff and create my own thing. That's what I'm trying to do. So we'll see what happens there, you know. And Kevin, you know, me and him, we have something that we're going to be working together in the near future, you know. And what we have cooking is very exciting and very different.
All right, well, we'll leave it at that. So appreciate it, man.
Oh, thank you so much. Anytime.